Welcome to Sobol Says for Parshas Tazria-Metzora. This parsha holds a special place in Sobol Says lore because it marks the anniversary or the birthday of Sobol Says. I gave the first Sobol Says on this parsha 7 years ago. And therefore now we, thank God, enter into our 8th year. The first class was 3 people and myself sitting around the table. And so Baruch Hashem, we've grown since then. And hopefully, because the number 8 always means Me'ala Teva, it's above nature, that this should be a year of Me'ala Teva for this class as well as for all of us. And I was thinking, actually, I was thinking what I must have been thinking that many years ago. Tazria-Metzora is a questionable parsha to begin a class on. I guess I was thinking if I could get through this parsha, then the others would become quite easy for me. So I will share with you that which I said on my very first class to open it up. It was a joke slash process for remembering all the parshios in Sefer Vayikra that my principal in high school had taught me. It's funny the things you remember. He just came to substitute for our class one time. Otherwise, cannot recall anything he or probably anything else I learned in that class for that matter. But this I do recall as to how to remember the parshios. So it's Vayikra Tzav Shmini, Tazria-Metzora, Achrei Mos Kedoshim, and more Bahar B'chukosai. And he said the way to remember it as follows. There was a story of a man who passed away, and at his funeral, the Rav is up there giving a hesped, giving a eulogy, and he says, yes, Chaim was such a generous man. And his wife is sitting there in the front row with their son, and she's thinking, generous? He was so cheap with me and the kids, he never gave us a penny. And the Rav is going on, and he says, and what a kindly man, always doing chesed. Kindly, he was abusive, the guy was stingy, never helped out anybody. And he was also a very righteous person. And she's thinking to herself, righteous? She turns to her son and he says, Shlomi, go up there and make sure we're at the right funeral. And we say, Tazria-Metzora, somebody who's a Metzora, a leper, a disgusting person, Achrei Mos, after they die, Kedoshim and more, we say they're holy. And that is the middle of those parshios, and then we end Bahar B'chukosai. So I just basically wanted to speak today about 2 inyanim, 2 topics, one about speaking, and one about true modesty and humility. So first let's focus on speaking. So we know the Gemara in Erechim, as well as many other places, give a few reasons as to why someone gets tsaras, which is, of course, the topic of these parshios. Tsaras, we will translate, or we will use the word leprosy for lack of a better word, even though, of course, we know that is not the proper translation. But basically, tsaras is a physical manifestation of a spiritual malady. So the word that got used was leprosy, so we'll use that as well. But nonetheless, it's important to remember it was not something contagious. That's not why someone was quarantined outside of the camp, which we'll discuss in a little while. It was something purely based on actions you took, and this was a punishment as well as a reminder from God that you needed to right your course. So the 2 main reasons given for it are Lashon Hara and Tsaras Ayin. Tsaras Ayin, which can either mean like a stingy or a begrudging eye. It can be stingy in the classic sense that you don't like to share your stuff with other people, or it can mean someone who's got a begrudging eye. They don't fargin other people. They can't be happy for other people. They can't acknowledge other people's accomplishments. It's very difficult for them. And in many ways, those 2 reasons are related. Lashon Hara and Tsaras Ayin. The thing about Lashon Hara, we of course always think of it as something of a stealth character assassination. And indeed it is. That is its main negative aspect, is the fact that it harms those that you speak about. But in truth, if you, let's say, are speaking to your spouse, whom you have an excellent relationship with and never share each other's secrets with anybody else, it is like putting it into a vault. You might think to yourself, under those circumstances, I could speak Lashon Hara to my spouse. After all, if my concern is that it's going to harm someone else, but I know in fact my spouse will never, ever repeat these words, then in fact I should, in theory, be able to speak Lashon Hara to them because it will go no further. Or take an even more extreme example, somebody on their deathbed and you are with them and you want to share just a little bit of Lashon Hara with them before they go into the next world. Probably not a great idea anyway to go out from this world hearing Lashon Hara, but I mean, you certainly don't have to worry about them repeating it to anyone. Nonetheless, the Isser is there. It is forbidden just the same as you would do it in any other situation. And the reason why is because it's not only about the subject of the Lashon Hara. It is the speaker of the Lashon Hara that suffers as much as the one that it's spoken about. And the reason why is because it has a debilitating effect on our outlook with everything. And what ends up happening is when we speak Lashon Hara, we become very cynical. We have a tsaras ayin. We start to look at things negatively when we speak negatively. And that in turn causes us to speak more Lashon Hara. The more cynical we are, the more Lashon Hara we speak. The more Lashon Hara we speak, the more cynical we become. And so on and so forth. And it becomes a vicious cycle. And we know those Balei Lashon Hara, those people who always speak Lashon Hara. We all know them. We should all avoid them. They're people that just have a knack for seeing bad in everyone and everything. You can rely on them to bring you down to earth in any situation. It could be a festive moment. It could be a wonderful moment. They've always got that little negative thing to say. And I heard from Rabbi Eliyahu Hoffman once that is the one trait that all of the Balei Lashon Hara have: negativity. Every single one of them has that trait of looking at things negative, and it's brought on by an unhappiness with themselves. If someone needs to denigrate others, it is at least in part based on their own negative self-image. Instead of acknowledging our own shortcomings, what do? We like to focus on or speak of other people's in a feeble attempt to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. Right? That somehow, if I say something bad about him, I'm somehow better in some kind of warped world. And if you think about it, think about a super happy occasion like a wedding. Have you ever been to a wedding and spoken with either the chassan or the kala and they had something bad to say about somebody? Never. It will never happen. On that, the most festive day of their life, they are so full of inner happiness. They are so ecstatic that the last thing they would ever want to do is talk negative about somebody else. Why? They don't need that. They feel so fulfilled. They feel so happy that of course they don't need to speak bad about somebody else in order to feel good. That's the measure. That's the key. The idea is someone who's a Baal Lashon Hara, and for that matter, someone who has tsaras ayin, a begrudging eye, they're almost one and the same. They are both causes and symptoms of the other, and they're all a reflection of one's lack of self-worth. And based on this, based on one's outlook, the fact that they have such a negative outlook, we can understand the famous vort by the Chidushei Harim, the first Gerer Rebbe. If you look on page 618, this is in Art Scroll 618, that's at the very end of Tazria. Pasuk 55. So this is discussing the period where this one happens to be about saras of the beged, but nonetheless it applies for all, that the Kohen now comes after the person's been quarantined to check on the nega, the spot, the afflicted spot, in order to determine whether it is tameh or tahor, whether it is impure or pure. So the pasuk says, Pasuk 55, V'ra'ah hakohen acharehu chabeis es hanega, v'nei lo hafach hanega es eino. Now that is translated normally and understandably. It says, the Kohen shall look at the affliction after it has been washed, and behold, the affliction has not changed its color. Okay? Therefore it is tameh. The lo hafach hanega es eino means the nega, lo hafach, has not changed. Es eino, in this sense, they mean appearance, which is why they use it as color. Remember, it's an interpretation, not a translation. And so that is what that pasuk comes to mean, that the Kohen checks, and behold, if the nega has not changed its appearance, its color, then it's tameh. The Chiddushei HaRim reads it differently. He says as follows. The pasuk should be understood. V'raha hakohen acharehu chabeis es hanega, and the Kohen looks after it's been washed. V'nei lo hafach es eino, and behold, lo hafach, it did not change. Eino means his eye. His eye has not changed. It seeing things the exact same way as before. It is still begrudging. It is still negative. It is still an ayin ra, a bad eye, and it has not yet changed into an ayin tov. And therefore it's tameh. And that's why he got the nega. The nega is what we will call the symptom of tsaras. Says the Chiddushei HaRim. Look at the word nega. Nun gimel ayin. It is the same letters as the word oneg, pleasure. Ayin, nun, gimel. We see the nun and the gimel stay in place. It's only, he says, where you put the ayin, where you put the eye. The same thing, if you look at it one way, it's a nega, it's an affliction, it's something negative. You put the eye in your eye in a different way, as an ayin tov, it becomes oneg, pleasure. And that is all dependent on your perspective. And that was the whole purpose of that procedure, to get the person to change their outlook, as we all should as well. And that may explain the strange language we find on page 620. The next page, 620, 621, now we have entered into Parshas Metzora, and Pasuk Gimel, the third Pasuk, it says, V'yatza Kohen el michutz lamachaneh. Now the Kohen has to make a house call, so to speak, and outside of the camp call. He has to now come to the Metzora, who is outside of the camp. He's sitting alone. We'll focus on that later as well. El michutz lamachaneh v'ra. I'm sorry. Pasuk 3, So it says, V'yatza Kohen el michutz lamachaneh v'ra Kohen v'nei nirpa nega hatzaras min hatzarua. Which means, the Kohen shall go forth to the outside of the camp. The Kohen shall look, and behold, the tzaras affliction had been healed from the Metzora. Many commentators ask, what does this mean, min hatzarua, from the Metzora? It's superfluous. We know who it's being healed or not healed from, right? It could have just said, V'ra Kohen v'nei nirpa nega hatzaras, and behold, the tzaras had been healed. Min hatzaru, we know it's from the Metzora. Who else is it going to be healed from? The Torah is perfectly efficient with its wording. So what do those additional words, min hatzarua, mean? So what the Torah is emphasizing is that it has to be min hatzarua, from within the Metzora, from within the person. This is not something about externalities, which is why, again, this tsaras, this leprosy, was not an external malady. That was just the sign to let us know what's going on. In fact, it's min hatzarua, it was inside, and therefore for him to be healed, when the Kohen sees, he says the tsaras has been healed min hatzarua, from inside of the tsarua, from within. It's not an external healing. Only when the person has been healed inside, by now having a more positive perspective, is he considered healed. It's been said that great people speak about ideas. Average people speak about things, and little people speak about others. We will return to this a little later on. But often what leads us to speak about others is that we judge situations too quickly. Before all the facts are in, and before we've even had a chance to verify it for ourselves and look at all sides, we've already made our judgments. And we know that Lashon Hara and its sibling, Sinas Chinam, right? Sinas Chinam, gratuitous hatred, is used interchangeably with Lashon Hara. Because just like the cynicism, they too as well are both the cause and the symptom of each other. When you speak Lashon Hara about someone, you cause both yourself and others to hate them gratuitously. That in turn, right, by causing that sinas chinam, the more people hate people, the more they speak Lashon Hara. The more people speak Lashon Hara, the more they come to hate people, and so on and so forth again. They are also used interchangeably, and the Gemara discusses that as well. Nonetheless, we know that Lashon Hara and sinas chinam were the cause of the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. And being that it has not yet been rebuilt, it is an epidemic that we still suffer from today. Which is why, if you turn, we're going to go a little outside, and this will be one of the reasons why I love these new Art Scroll Chumashim, because the stone Chumashim, because they now come with two bookmarkers, which I appreciate for those of us who like to traverse around this book. So if you turn to page 1273, we have Eicha, Lamentations, that which we read on Tisha B'Av. So if you'll notice something, it's incredible. The first 4 chapters of Eicha are an acrostic. They're actually alphabetical. They are the Aleph Beis. Every single pasuk, it's the Aleph Beis. Sometimes it's like a tripled over, 3 Aleph, 3 Beis, 3 Gimel, always in alphabetical order. But in the first chapter, it stays true to form all the way. But there is something amazing. In chapters 2, 3, and 4, although it is alphabetical, it goes out of order consistently in all 3 chapters in one place. Each of those 3 chapters, the Pei comes before the Ayin. And that's troubling because we know the Aleph Beis, and we know that it goes Ayin and then Pei. In these 3 chapters, the Pei comes before the Ayin. And the commentators tell us, you know why that is? What is Pei? Pei is spelled Pei, Hey. Peh, that's the mouth. What is Ayin? Ayin is Ayin, Yud, Nun, I. In those situations, the mouth came before the eye. We spoke before we bothered to investigate, before we bothered to look into a matter. Automatically we're speaking, we're judging, we're deciding. And that's why we find ourselves with an Eicha. That's why we find ourselves in the situation that we are, why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and why it continues to not be rebuilt. Because we always put our Peh before our Ayin. We judge too quickly. And I want to suggest further based on that, the following idea. If you want to hold your place at 1273, the beginning of Eicha, put that one bookmark down, and let's go back to our Parsha, page 616 in Parshas Tazria. Something very interesting. Pasuk 46. This is talking about now what needs to be done with the Metzora. Now he's been determined to be a Metzora. And he needs to be, not like other people who were Tameh, but rather he needs to be sent outside of the camp to sit alone in isolation. The Pasuk tells us, Kol yemei asher hanega bo yitma tamehu, bodad yeshev michutz lamachaneh moshavo. All the days that the affliction is upon him, he shall remain contaminated. He is contaminated. He shall dwell in isolation. His dwelling shall be outside. As Rashi tells us, why is it bodad yeshev? Why does he have to sit alone outside the camp? So the Rashi tells us, Shelo yiyu shar tameim yoshvim imo, so that the other Tameh people should not sit with him. He was in the ultimate time out. He had to sit not only outside of the camp, but it'd be outside of the camp, not near anybody else, in isolation. But dad yeshev. Omru Rabosenu, ma nishtana mishar tameim leishev badad. What is different about him from all the other impure people that he needs to sit alone? Ho'il v'hu hevdil b'lashon hara bein ish li'ishto uvein ish l're'ehu. Avhu yavdil. Because his speech, his talking, his bad talk caused a separation and isolation between husband and wife, between a person and his friend, and therefore he now has to be isolated himself. That which you did to others must now be done to you. That is why it says Yeshev Badad. So we see, due to Lashon Hara, you need to sit isolated, you need to sit alone. With that in mind, Yeshev Badad, let's look amazingly at the first three words of Eicha. Eicha starts Eicha, Yashva Badad. Now, as that's normally interpreted, it means, alas, she sits in solitude, referring to Yerushalayim. Eicha in this situation is interpreted as alas. But in fact, the word eicha comes from the word eich. How? How is it? How do we find ourselves in this situation? That Yerushalayim is in ruins. That we have not yet rebuilt the Beis HaMikdash. Eicha, how? Yashva Badad, from sitting alone. A clear reference to the Metzora, to the person that speaks Lashon Hara. He causes people to separate, to sit alone. And therefore, that is why the Beis HaMikdash is still not here, simply because of the Lashon Hara and the Sinas Chinam that it causes. And as we mentioned, the Metzora is thrust into that solitude. Yashva Badad, Yeshev Badad. He sits in isolation, not because he's choosing to. No one speaks Lashon Hara in that situation too. But rather, as a punishment, so to speak, he is thrust into solitude, into privacy and humility, having to sit alone on the outskirts of the camps. That privacy is imposed upon him to counter the private nature of his sin. Lashon Hara, as we said, is stealth character assassination. You very privately, very quietly have something to say about somebody. Oh yeah? So because of that, we are going to make you now very private, alone, away from everyone. Now there are two types of privacy and two types of self-abnegation or humility. In each instance, one is positive and one is negative. There is a very negative type of privacy, and that is the main feature of our Parsha, whether it's hiding your assets so no one can share them, right? That's the tsaras eye, and the begrudging eye, as we said originally, was not just an outlook of negativity. That is mamish stinginess. You don't like to share your stuff with other people. You don't like to lend your stuff to other people. It's all yours. That's a very private thing. You like to hide your stuff. Or whether it's sneaky whispering, as we said, which is what Lashon Hara is, it's told in private. This type of privacy is the most heinous of all. It stems from a sense of shame or embarrassment, or more likely a lack of self-confidence that leads one to keep all his good stuff to himself while knocking others' accomplishments or otherwise speaking negatively of them to make the speaker somehow feel better about himself or raise his own status in his own eyes. The more laudable type of privacy comes from tznius, from modesty, not only in our dress, but in our actions and our outlook. It stems from a sense of gratitude to our Creator and an acknowledgement that all of our blessings come from above, and we need not prance around exhibiting them, since we should not take any credit for them. It actually stems from a sense of great confidence and self-worth, but in a positive sense. I need not show off because I am confident in and satisfied with what I have. My showing it to you does not enhance it. It diminishes it, if anything, since embedded in that is a sense that its source is me and not my Creator. And frankly, if I need you to approve or like the object that I got, then I probably don't like it that much myself. If I need you to tell me it's good, then maybe I don't think it's that good. Similarly, there are two types of humility, and while such a trait is laudable in and of itself, in its own right, One of them again stems from the negative trait of low self-worth. I'm going to get that right. Or otherwise just being down about oneself. Whereas the commendable one stems from a realization that everything we have comes from our Creator. Someone who is falsely humble most likely just thinks little of himself, or is otherwise fishing for a compliment. We all know those guys. Yeah, it was not, and they're hoping you're going to say, no, you're awesome. Or, more on point, as we shall delve into in a moment, they are humbled by their circumstances. These are guys that if things were going awesome, they'd be in your face about it all the time. It just so happens things are not going well for them now, so they are quote unquote humble. But that's not a good humility, right? That's a humility that's more akin to shame. By contrast, the laudable humility, like the proper type of privacy, is based on a self-confidence, a gratitude to Hashem for one's blessings, which are in turn humbling. You would ask, why would God see fit to give this stuff to me? I'm no better than anybody else. As opposed to the improper type of humility, it is not a sense of low worth, it is a sense of humility that comes from within, based on an acknowledgement of God's greatness. The author C.S. Lewis was probably my favorite author as a child because he, of course, wrote the Narnia series, which I loved. He also was a Christian theological writer, so I would not normally quote him in this setting, but he said something so Torah true and so well that it bears repeating. He said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And that is really the key to proper humility. So we see that the Metzora is forced into privacy and humility by external forces, right? His banishment from the camp, in order to cure him and bring him to the proper privacy and humility. We need to do that to him in order to get him back on track. It is with the foregoing in mind that we can begin to understand some of the curious components of the procedure that the Metzora undergoes in order to effect atonement. Specifically, that a Kohen must declare him a Metzora. If you have a situation where you have a Kohen Am Haaretz, an ignoramus, a completely unlearned Kohen, and you have the Gadol Ador with him, who knows everything about Tzaras. Nonetheless, it is only the Kohen that is empowered to declare him Tameh or Tahor, to declare whether it's Tzaras or not. Yes, he can hear from the Talmid Chacham who can advise him, but it only matters if the Kohen says it. Why is that? Why does it have to be a Kohen? So, according to the Shemi Shmuel and others, the reason that the Kohen must do the procedure is because Kohanim are the most private people of all. The way they were clothed in the Beis HaMikdash, right? They were fully clothed. They even had those breeches, those undergarments to cover from the underneath as well, so that they would not even be exposed to the stones of the Mizbeach. They were as tznius as it gets. And all the exciting avoda they did, which was the focus of their mission in life, almost all of it was done out of the eyesight of everybody else. You couldn't see most of the Kohen's avoda. You couldn't get close enough, nor could you see it from a vantage point. Some you could see, much of it couldn't even be seen. They did private avoda in the most private place in the world. So they understood the idea of privacy, of modesty. And as we said before, the pasuk said it had to be min hatzarua, from within the Metzora. His humility must come from within. It cannot be from external factors. They can get him there. They can banish him to the outskirts, and they can make him go through the procedure. But ultimately, it has to be from within, because otherwise, when those circumstances change, so may his contrition. So they need to get him in the right place for him to change internally. But at that point, it's all up to him. Thus we see that the Metzora is transformed from the negative privacy and humility traits to the positive ones. He goes from using private moments to say bad things about people and to hiding his stuff into the true type of privacy and humility. He got into this mess through his lack of self-worth, leading into the private gossiping. Now he needs the most private person of all, the Kohen, to cure him and declare him healed. The Kohen understands that it's all about privacy, covering and hiding that which others expose, be it flesh, be it wealth, be it secrets, be it holiness, and thus the Kohen must administer the cure. Once the Metzora becomes a private person in the positive case, then he can be deemed pure. And his humility is transformed as well. He goes from someone whose humility is dictated by external forces, isolation, embarrassment, suffering, to one who is truly humble, contrite with the knowledge that Hashem was watching and listening to his private gossiping sessions. You see, this is a big wake-up call. We unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure what one is supposed to say in these circumstances, do not have this anymore. We don't have where all of a sudden God gives us a little sign to let us know precisely what we were doing wrong. Here we did have it. And what's amazing, it's a realization. There is something else listening besides you and your intended listener. It was God. He was listening to everything you were saying. And that's why you got the punishment. But the good news is Hashem cared enough about the person to allow him to achieve that atonement. By acknowledging Hashem's greatness, he is led towards true humility, born by self-worth, confidence, and knowledge that there is a creator above who runs every minute detail of the world. And it is there that his understanding of proper privacy and humility is achieved. The Gemara tells us, Ein habracha mitzuya ela b'davar shesumo min ha'ayin. That blessing is only found in something that is hidden from the eye. That's why Eastern European parents, of which I had two, always would cover up anything good. They were concerned about ayin hara, but more importantly, it's based on this Gemara. If you want true blessing, don't show it off to everybody. When we are private out of humility, when we acknowledge the source of all that we have, then and only then will we have true bracha. And we see that the Metzora must be compelled, dragged into being healed. This is not something where he's like, yeah, I'll go outside the camp for a couple of weeks. And he has to be done that through external forces in order to ultimately be healed internally. And we see that based on an incredible observation by Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz, the Mir Mashgiach. If you turn to the beginning of Parshas Metzora, page 620, Pasuk 2, it says the following. Zos tiyeh Toras HaMetzora b'yom ta'araso, v'huva el HaKohen, which is translated, this shall be the law of the Metzora on the day of his purification. He shall be brought to the Kohen. Okay? Sounds simple and straightforward, but let's note the term huva. He shall be brought to the Kohen. Let's contrast that with another pasuk. Get that bookmark here. That speaks about the Nazir. If you'll all recall, the Nazir is someone, very briefly, who takes upon himself for a minimum of 30 days that he will not drink wine or have grape products. He will not become tameh from a dead person, and he will not cut his hair. So on page 760, Pasuk 13, at the end of his Nazirus, he has to now come bring karbanos, and the Pasuk says, V'zos Toras HaNazir, V'yom los yemei nizro, yavi oso el pesach ohel moed. Interesting, it's almost an identical pasuk to the Metzora. Here it says, this shall be the law of the Nazirite, on the day his abstinence is completed, he shall bring himself to the entrance of the tent of meeting. So let's note the difference. In extremely similar situation, the pasuk says Yavi Oso. As Rashi tells us, what does Yavi Oso mean? Yavi es atzmo. He brings himself. Strange terminology. He brings himself. But now, let's contrast that, because that's very different. By a Nazir, it says he brings himself. Whereas by the Metzora, it says he is brought. Says Rav Yerucham. A Metzora is brought reluctantly, because in truth, he's not in charge of himself. Rather, he is a person who is subject to other forces in charge of him. Mouth, can't keep it shut. His Yetzer Hara is in charge, which manifests through his Lashon Hara. Money, it controls him. It's in charge of him. That's why he can't part with it. That's why he's stingy. That's why he can't share. Haughtiness, his ego controls him. Thus we see he must be brought to the Kohen, and he must be expelled from the camp. He is shown he is subject to outside forces that are in control of him. Thus we must use external forces to rectify him. By contrast, what is a Nazir? A Nazir is almost by definition someone who's in charge of himself. He sees a problem, be it haughtiness, be it lust, and he takes control of the situation. He doesn't wait until it gets severe and he has to be dragged to the Kohen. He addresses it himself. That is why the pasuk says he brings himself. And that is a great lesson for us all. We all have our issues and our weaknesses and our challenges. The question is, are we a Nazir or a Metzora? Do we recognize them and try to work on ourselves? Or does Hashem need to force us to do it? That becomes our choice. Which brings us to one final thought. This idea encompasses the topic of tzaras itself, as well as its cause, Lashon Hara, which, as we said earlier, is both a symptom and a cause of sinas chinam, gratuitous hatred. And we will begin with a story that I heard from Rabbi Frand, based on a Mishnah in Maseches Negaim. Maseches Negaim, yes, you guessed it, talks about Negaim. Negaim is the plural of the word nega, nega being the term for the tzaras affliction. It is called a nega. The Mishnah in Negaim says, in speaking about the Kohen, Kol hanegaim adam ra'a chutz minigei atzmo. The simple translation of that, as well as its intended meaning, is Kol hanegaim adam ra'a. A Kohen can look or paskin on anyone's negaim chutz minigei atzmo, except for his own. For himself is for his own. In other words, a Kohen cannot self-diagnose his tzaras. He can diagnose anyone else's, but not his own. The lesson from that, however, is using nega in its colloquial sense. We use the term nega often to mean a blemish or a flaw. Right? You have a nega, it's a blemish. Here it's used as a specific definition, but it's also used generally to mean a flaw or a fault. And we can say the pasuk says, Kol hanegaim adam ra. A person can see all flaws, all faults, chutz minigei atzmo, except for his own. We have trouble seeing our own flaws. In other words, we are excellent at seeing other people's faults, but we are blind when it comes to our own. And I wanted to suggest we can even make a further play on those words based on the story I'm about to share with you that Rabbi Frand brings down, that the word nega, okay, which we translated as flaw or fault, or tzaras, has the same spelling and root as nun gimel ayin nogea, as in nogea b'davar, which means someone who is an interested party. He has an interest in the outcome. He is subjective. We are very often nogea b'davar in almost every conversation we have. We are rarely objective. We often have some sort of an agenda, but we must be careful. It talks about dinim, that when somebody is going to judge, they cannot be nogea b'davar. They cannot have any interest in the outcome, or else automatically it is going to cloud their judgment. Whether we try to prevent it or not, it's impossible. We are always affected when we are nogea b'davar. So we have a lack of clarity because we have an interest in the outcome. So I wanted to suggest, the Mishnah is saying, we can't see our own negaim because we are nogea b'davar. We're an interested party, which leads to bias on our own behalf. We can't see it. We're always interested in looking at ourselves in the best possible way. So there is a story told about the great halachic decisor, the Shach. The Shach was so named because it's an abbreviation of his most famous sefer, the Sifsei Kohen. And the Shach, which was an authoritative commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. He was literally considered the halachic authority at the time. Although he had many detractors, no doubt, but the Shach is it. So one time somebody had a din Torah with him. They had a dispute that they needed to have a Beis Din determine the outcome for. Now obviously they could not have a Beis Din, a reasonable Beis Din, in the Shach's hometown. I mean, think about it. If you had some din Torah against Rav Chaim Kanievsky in Bnei Brak, I mean, that's just not something you would do. It's a bad idea. So they decided they would go to a different town. He and the litigant would go to a different town. Now, these were the days that they did not yet have the Gedolim baseball cards, right? That had like the pictures of all the Gedolim. So nobody knew what the Shach looked like other than in his local town, which would give him more anonymity and therefore hopefully lead to a just result. Sure enough, they come to that next town and they each present their cases. And believe it or not, the Shach loses. He loses the Beis Din. So the Shach goes over to the Rosh Beis Din, the head judge, and he says to him, okay, you are the judge, and I of course accept your ruling. But tell me, why did you paskin the way you did? Why did you decide the case the way you did? And the Rav answered, what do you mean? It's a Shach in Choshen Mishpat. Wouldn't you know it? The Rosh Beis Din did not know that he was ruling in a case with the Shach, and his determination to rule against the Shach was based on the writings of the Shach. Unbelievable. But even more unbelievable, the Shach was taken aback. He himself had written about that halacha. But to apply the halacha to his situation, he was blinded. Because kol hanagoyim adam ra chutz minigei atzmo. It's much harder for us to see when we are nogea b'davar. And believe me, the Shach was as pure as you could get. But nonetheless, it's impossible. When we're nogea b'davar, we can't see it. The Shach couldn't even see it himself, even though he is the one that articulated that halacha. We can see others' flaws as well, but not our own. And that can help explain why. The antidote to Lashon Hara and Sinas Chinam is V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. That you should love your friend as much as yourself. What does that mean? What is that idea? Surely we cannot love another as much as we love ourselves. Impossible. Perhaps this is the answer, though. We need to look at other people's negayim like we view our own. What do we do with our own, if we're even able to see them? We let it slide. We always give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, the excuses, the rationalizations. A guy can't put two sentences together, but all of a sudden he becomes an incredible defense attorney with the greatest arguments when it comes to himself. And hey, I'm trying, I'm having a bad day, I'm a good guy, I'm tired. We know the story. We say it to ourselves possibly every single day. And okay, no problem, keep that up. As long as you're striving, as long as you're trying to do better, don't beat yourself up too much, keep it up. But just make sure to apply it to others as well. That's what it means, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Be as blind to others' flaws as you are to your own. And make sure to give them as many excuses as you would yourself. You'll be amazed at what an attitude change that creates. And it will allow Hashem to overlook your flaws because you overlook others' flaws. And our goal in our relationship with Hashem is to have Him notice less flaws, because after all, none of us are flawless. Good Shabbos.